out pretty widely at 3 o'clock. By 3:40, Corbyn was on his feet, and we expected him to pull the trigger, as it were, and nothing happened. And yet, about 8 minutes ago, Jeremy Corbyn said this.
I've listened very carefully to all of the answers the Prime Minister gave during this lengthy exchange today. I've listened very carefully to what members on all sides of the House have said. And it's very clear that it is very bad, unacceptable that we should be waiting almost a month before we have a meaningful vote on a crucial issue facing the future of this country. The Prime Minister has obdurately refused to ensure that a vote took place on the date she agreed. She refuses to allow a vote to take place this week and is now, I assume, thinking the vote will be on the 14th of January, almost a month away. This is unacceptable in any way whatsoever. So, Mr. Speaker, as the only way I can think of ensuring a vote takes place this week, I am about to table a motion which says the following: that this House has no confidence in the Prime Minister due to her failure to allow the House of Commons to have a meaningful vote straight away on the withdrawal agreement and framework for future relationships between the UK and the European Union. And that will be tabled immediately, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Well, the Prime Minister has kicked the can down the road. Mike Cushy's very, very good at that, of course. And so we're now told that the vote that, of course, was supposed to take place last Tuesday and was pulled isn't going to happen. To get some immediate reaction, I'm going to go to LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood. Theo, a very strange afternoon.
It's back on, Nigel.
I know. It's the hokey-cokey, isn't it?
The comings and goings of whether Jeremy Corbyn will table a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister. This isn't, and it's really important to stress, a motion of no confidence in the government which would be used to trigger an election. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't want to strike a partisan or too partisan a tone by demanding that Conservative MPs abstain in order to bring down the government. That's why he's gone after Theresa May as Prime Minister. Just before 3 p.m, we heard that he was going to table the motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister. He then stood up to reply to the Prime Minister's statement at 3:45, and that motion of no confidence was not forthcoming.
That's right. Yeah.
And now, of course, at 6 o'clock, he decides to table that motion. And there will be, if Jeremy Corbyn gets his way, a vote in the next few days, because having listened to the debate in the House of Commons, obviously, he's decided that he cannot, that now is the moment to strike, that now is the moment that it might be possible to get Conservative MPs to simply sit on their hands, to not go through the voting lobbies as ordered by the Conservative whips, and that would fundamentally weaken, in Jeremy Corbyn's view, the Prime Minister.
But it has no force of law. As you say, a motion of no confidence in the government wouldn't mean a couple of weeks would go by, and unless things were sorted out, there'd be a general election. What does this vote actually mean in terms of force of law?
You're quite right to point that out. Technically, the Prime Minister would have to go, but, and this is a but, she could simply say that this is a non-binding motion, that like the motion that was brought in against the Transport Secretary Chris Grayling by Labour, that they didn't have confidence in Chris Grayling, that actually she doesn't have to listen to it, she doesn't have to abide by it. That's very different, I should say, to a motion of no confidence against the government, which would bring the government down. This is, to put it in a different way, is rolling the pitch. This is about weakening the Prime Minister by showing her, or trying to highlight the fact that she isn't willing to table a vote, that she isn't willing to table a meaningful vote before Christmas.
Do you get the feeling, Theo, that he's been pushed into this by his own backbenchers?
Yes, it does. It does feel like that. There was a laughable reaction on social media and comments to the fact that Jeremy Corbyn, having said that he would table a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister, then, well, in effect, bottled it, Nigel. He decided not to go ahead. And obviously, as the afternoon has gone on, the debate has gone on, they've decided that actually now is the time to finally act.
Oh dear. Theo, thank you very much indeed. Well, there's Theo Usherwood pointing out it's been a game of the hokey-cokey, the left leg in, the left leg out. No one's known where they are, but he is now tabling a motion, Jeremy Corbyn, of no confidence in the Prime Minister, I guess hoping that many of those rebels who expressed no confidence in her last week will simply abstain or not turn up. Is now the right time for him to do it? Can he actually win this? And I would have thought that in many ways it would have suited Corbyn to do nothing, to wait until the 14th of January, to wait until the Prime Minister probably failed to get her vote passed in the House of Commons. That might have been the moment to have a go, at the entire government. But I fail to see why he's doing this now. Have to say, folks, he looks a bit indecisive to me. He looks a bit caught. I mean, after all, he is a leaver in charge of a predominantly parliamentary Remain party. I'm not sure this is really very good politics. Let me ask you, has he got this right? Was now the right time for him to do this? Andrew is a first-time caller from Leamington Spa in Warwickshire. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening, Mr. Farage. Hello. Good evening. My question is, when is a politician going to do something to actually serve the country? I mean, in answer to your question, I think Jeremy Corbyn doing this now is ridiculous. I mean, my initial question I wanted to ask was, when are we going to use our trump card that the European Union last year had a 67 billion trade surplus to the UK, turn around to the EU, say, you know what, your deal is terrible, we're taking no deal, you're not getting a 39 billion divorce settlement, and you go back with no deal.
Well, I'd agree with that, Andrew, as you know. I, of course, would agree with that. But that's not the Prime Minister's position. She's tried to sort of keep us half in, half out. She couldn't get her vote through the Commons, so she pulled the vote. She's kicked it on to the 14th of January. So why has Corbyn decided to act now, Andrew?
I think it's because he doesn't have he doesn't have a plan B, and he didn't have the ammunition to go for the jugular when he could have done. If there was some competent opposition, that you could have gone for the jugular months ago. I mean, I know it always seems very simple from the outside, but 2.5 years ago, I more sided with Remain because I didn't know what Plan Leave was. As soon as I heard that we could get a free trade deal, I thought this is the best of both worlds. We get a free trade deal with the EU, and then we can then get out of the customs union. I mean, I do a lot of UK exports. I speak fluent German, French, and I've dealt with the EU for 15 years, sold them millions of pounds worth of goods, and I jumped at the chance, and I thought, countries like Kenya, who are Anglophiles, import millions every 2 weeks. I see Kenya buy millions of pounds worth of construction equipment from China. Now, we've been locked in deals with East Africa. God, after 11 years, the EU didn't get anywhere with negotiations with India. They're still ongoing. I was thinking, as soon as I heard that we could get a free trade deal, I thought, fantastic, and we can leave the customs union.
Not anymore. We're going to stay inside the customs union, perhaps indefinitely, under Mrs May's plans, and be unable to make our own trade deals. Andrew, thank you for the call and for the passion, and Andrew confused as to why he's done this. Pointless and disingenuous, I get on Twitter. This has no impact on the Fixed Term Parliament Act agreed, because it's a vote of confidence in May rather than the government. It could embarrass May, but seriously, it isn't clear that she's beyond embarrassment. Well, I do understand that. Very strange, very odd behaviour from Corbyn this afternoon. Why table a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister now? Why not wait until her deal goes down in flames? Maybe Kaleem from Dorking can enlighten me. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I agree with what your previous caller has just said, and I agree with your point that, he should have waited until January the 14th or whenever the date is. But I'd just like to say, Corbyn is in a sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. He's probably a more honourable politician because we all know what his real politics is. He's an unbridled leftist.
So how is it honourable, Kaleem? How is it honourable to hide that?
Well, I think, he's in a very difficult position because he's got a parliamentary party which is basically against him, and then they've been trying to destabilise him for years. And this is just another tactic, and he has to appease, his backbenchers. But I think, so he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. But I think, if Theresa May has to go, We all know that. And the only people who can get rid of her is the Parliamentary Conservative Party. Now, the interesting thing is, only last week, we had the Conservative vote, no confidence motion.
Yep, we did.
And 100 plus people. And so she's mortally wounded, but she's gone into intensive care now, sort of coming back and thinks, I've sort of defeated them off, for another 12 months.
But they're not going to back Corbyn, are they, Killeen?
But this is the irony. They're not going to back Corbyn. Then what? But they need to man up and think not of their own interests, but in the interest of the country. And Theresa May talks about I'm a one nation Tory. She's doing her best to break the nation, as far as I'm concerned. 52%, 17.4 million people voted out. These people are not stupid.
But she says she's honouring that. She says she's delivering the Brexit people voted for.
Absolutely rubbish. She's got no negotiating prowess. Look, she needs to understand, like a previous caller said, we run a trade deficit with Europe. Europe needs us massively.
I know.
But the other thing is, we provide a security and defence umbrella to Europe and have done for most of the last 50 years. And I think that's a significant negotiating perspective.
And that's defence and intelligence, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think we also have, a network of energy grids across Europe that link into UK, and that's a significant, so this, whichever hard Brexit, soft Brexit, I believe in a hard Brexit from a negotiating perspective, because I think once you demonstrate your fallback position, then you can negotiate hard, and yes, you have to compromise and all that sort of stuff.
I tell you what, Theresa May's not doing that, and nor would Jeremy Corbyn. Kaleem, thank you. Well, that breaking news over the course of the last 25 minutes that Jeremy Corbyn, after an afternoon of speculation whether he would or whether he wouldn't, has said he intends to table a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister Theresa May over a handling of the Brexit deal. But, as Bonnie on Facebook says, it's not legally binding, so it can effectively be ignored. This is not a motion of confidence in the government, which could have led to a general election. It is a strange move in many ways, in terms of timing. That's my view. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, here on LBC at 6:15. So Jeremy Corbyn is tabling a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister over a handling of the Brexit deal vote. I'm guessing that vote will take place in the next 3 days, Parliament rising for the Christmas recess on Thursday of this week. The Prime Minister has announced there'll be 5 days of debate next week and a vote on her deal on the 14th of January, or at least within a couple of days of that. Whether there's going to be any change to that deal over the Christmas holiday period, I very, very much doubt, although it has been a slightly better day for the Prime Minister, with Edward Lee, Lincolnshire backbencher, sort of finally saying, OK, I give in, I'll support the deal. So maybe she's garnering a bit more support for the deal. But then given that she was facing the prospect last Tuesday of losing by perhaps 150 to 200 votes, she's got a very long way to go. But it does all, I think this afternoon's will he, won't he, and then he does, from Jeremy Corbyn, does raise that question about the leader of the opposition. Is he decisive? Is he indecisive? Is he a leader with one opinion trapped within a parliamentary party with another opinion? And was there really any point in moving this motion now, as presumably it isn't going to work? And anyway, it's not a motion on the government, but on the Prime Minister. It's all very strange. Winston says to me on Facebook, Labour has played party politics throughout all the Brexit negotiations. They're a disgrace. Bertha says Corbyn's playing games. He will lose, and it will be nothing but a waste. Neil says the person who deserves no confidence is Jeremy Corbyn, not Theresa May. Somebody out there tell me Corbyn has got this right. 0345 6060 973. We're going down to Romford to speak to Tony, a first-time caller. Good evening, Tony.
Evening, Nigel. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, welcome to you. Strange timing, this, from Corbyn, isn't it?
Absolutely, but not unexpected. Nigel, obviously, he's playing party politics, but I've had to pull over and call you because I believe your last caller, Kareem, used the word honourable and Jeremy Corbyn in the same sentence. And I was so incensed I had to call you.
So you've pulled over to ring me, yeah?
Yeah, we are talking about the same Jeremy Corbyn that shared several platforms with many terrorists around the world. Mm-hmm. The same Jeremy Corbyn that's not interested in the country's future. After all, he's a Leaver himself. He's now playing party politics to try and disrupt anything he possibly can.
But Tony, when he mixes with, the late Martin McGuinness and Jerry Adams, and when he goes to the Palestinian Martyrs Cemetery and is part of a wreath laying on the graves of some people who committed those heinous acts of barbarity and murder at the Olympics back in 1972 in Germany, there are some who would say, Tony, he's supporting freedom fighters.
Well, anybody that says that are wrong, Nigel. He's supporting terrorists. It goes against every British value, all British people's values. And fortunately, being a Tory supporter, he would never ever get voted into government because people remember this and people won't forget this anti-British behaviour.
Well, I was there in St Paul's Cathedral at the 75th anniversary, Tony, of the Battle of Britain, was it 3 years ago? And I remember, I was sitting behind him, I remember him not singing the words to the national anthem and thinking, this doesn't really work in this country, does it? Tony, do you think really, if it wasn't for Corbyn, Labour could be well ahead in the polls?
Well, if Keir Starmer was the leader, I'm afraid the Conservative voters in the country would be seriously in trouble.
I think you're right.
In my opinion.
No, I think you may well be right. And fascinating, Tony, that the polls out yesterday suggesting Labour 1 point in the lead, despite the Tory party ripping themselves to pieces over Brexit and May's leadership. Tony, thank you for pulling over. Thank you for your passion. Nigel, this is like a pantomime. You couldn't make it up, says Laura from Shenfield. Nigel, I wouldn't trust Corbyn to pass a motion of any description, says Gary in Horsham. Naughty. Whatever we think of the Prime Minister, she has more raw courage in her little finger than Corbyn has in his whole body, says Graham. Peter says elitist politicians ignore the referendum results at their peril. Well, I agree with that, Peter, and maybe one thing that Leavers could say for Jeremy Corbyn is the only reason the Labour Party has not as yet adopted a second referendum as frontline policy is because Corbyn is stopping it from happening. I think there is perhaps just a little something in that. Shaz says what Corbyn is doing will achieve nothing but more division. Nick is calling from Stroud in Gloucestershire. Good evening, Nick.
Good evening, Nigel.
What do you make of the timing of this?
I think it's actually quite smart.
Okay.
I'm possibly surprised you haven't seen it because it's probably a smart move. If you think about it, in the coming election, who would he want to face? Now, he wouldn't want to face anyone that's slightly switched on, whether it be a Rob or Penny Mordaunt. It would suit him to be up against May. Now, he knows full well if he goes against May, this vote, they'll all rally round and protect her, and she will be in place. And then the sequencing, then when they challenge and her vote, she's voted down on that deal, then they're in a position to perhaps call an election. So I think the timing of this isn't quite so as daft as we possibly initially think.
All right. But do you think he's got any chance of winning?
Of winning
this vote of no confidence in her?
Oh no, he doesn't want to.
He doesn't want it. So
no.
Right. So what you're saying is she's the one opponent he wants to face, and by doing this, he gets the Tory party to rally round and defend her.
Exactly.
Okay. Fine. No. I get it. Nick, quite clever stuff, and it's playing a long chess game, that, isn't it?
And let's be honest, you, more than anybody else, knows it's been a long old game, isn't
I've been playing a very long game. Yeah, that's certainly true.
The second referendum, the rerun, that's like that fantastic speech you made the other night. We've got to redouble our efforts. We've got to be prepared for that.
Well, do you know what, Nick? Do you know what? I mean, I was talking to a very senior Eurosceptic Tory today. He said, Nigel, it'll be fine. We've got the legislation in place. All the government has to do is hold firm, and we will leave on March the 29th. Well, maybe we will. But the point of what I was saying on Friday at the Leave Means Leave meeting, Nick, was that the reason you build an army isn't because you want to fight a war, but it's in case you have to fight one. And that's what I intend to do to make sure if things do go wrong, we can fight the next referendum. Nick, I thank you for your thoughts and your strategical thinking. At least Corbyn is still there and hasn't resigned and run away from this mess. I get. Well, he's only just come into it, really, hasn't he? This is all a game to overturn Brexit, says Adrian. Well, Adrian may be in a silent covert way, maybe Corbyn is one of the people the Brexiteers should be cheering, because if he wasn't there, they'd be advocating a second referendum. At least I believe that. Ben in Bristol is a regular caller to this show. Ben, welcome back.
Babylon calling. This
Hello.
Is Babylon calling. Can you hear me?
We can. So, Ben, why is he doing this now? I mean, was he pushed into it, do you think, by his backbenchers?
Well, I was working on, I'm a postman, Nigel. I was working on the post today in one of the Liberal Heartland's Eastern Corbyn posters up in the wall everywhere. Either Corbyn posters or Green Party posters.
Yeah.
Stop Brexit, EU flags. Well, Corbyn, I've got a couple of quick points. Corbyn, he's a good fit, a Clement Attlee type, great after the war, no good in the war. He should stay out of Brexit. He's got no ideas to offer. And even if he was trying to be faithful to the Brexit vote, look at the people around him. I mean, he was deputy saying he wants to go for a second vote. No chance. I tried to call in a couple of days ago, Nigel. They didn't put me on, but there's some talk in my friends. The symbolism. I look at the symbol sometimes of Theresa May locked in that car. She couldn't get out.
Yeah, in Germany, yeah.
And it looks like she's locked into a process now. She can't get the vote passed. They tried to depose her, and it wasn't that revealing as well when they went against her and tried to depose her, and they couldn't. The MPs, they're so pro-Remain that they didn't vote her out. Same with Corbyn in a way. Even the MPs don't represent his people either. If they'd have put May's vote to the Tory members, they'd have voted her out. They would have gone to Davis
but why is Corbyn doing this now?
Oh, I can't focus too much. I think he's just playing a few games and seeing what will happen. His contribution is not that valid. What I see happening, Nigel, is we're locked in on it's for no deal. Get ready for no deal on the 19th. And I don't think that's such a bad outcome. I think it's the only way to get free. If we don't take a no deal, Nigel,
no deal right now, Ben.
This is going to go on for months.
No deal now, Ben, is the only way of delivering the Brexit people voted for if the government can hold firm. And by the way, you compared him to Attlee. And you said Attlee wasn't much good in the war. I will just say this to you, Ben, that on his office, right to the end of his time as an MP, he had Major Attlee, because he served as a major on the Western Front and was very proud of the contribution he'd made. And he was a true patriot, Clem Attlee. May have been left of centre, but a true patriot, and totally opposed, Ben, to us joining the EEC.
Yeah, no, well, look, I'm talking more in metaphor. I see him a bit more like, starting the NHS. Corbyn, he's good on stuff like that. The NHS, he's got some interesting ideas. I don't think he would ever be Prime Minister. I couldn't see it. But he should just keep his hands off this Brexit until it's all over and done. But the Tories, they're not perfect, Nigel. You know that, I know that.
I do.
But it's better in the Tory hands than
well, maybe you're right. I wouldn't want Keir Starmer anywhere near it. I agree with that. Ben, thank you. Happy Christmas. Ray says, for Christmas, we should all ask Santa for a new party we can actually vote for and trust and not play party politics. It's a lovely idea. Gareth says, Corbyn as PM, Abbott Home Secretary, McDonnell Chancellor. Oh my goodness, this can't be allowed to happen. Well, who's to say it might? But it was a big surprise. They were only 1% ahead in the polls published in the Sunday newspapers yesterday, despite all the extraordinary internal civil wars that have been going on within the Conservative Party. They've got a problem. Maybe that's why Jeremy Corbyn has called this motion of no confidence in Theresa May. He's reasserting himself as the strong leader of the opposition. Will it work? I'm not so sure. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here at LBC. It's now 6:30. Really odd afternoon, because it sort of starts off at about 3 o'clock with us being told that Jeremy Corbyn is going to go for a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister unless she imminently announces the date upon which there's going to be a vote on her withdrawal agreement. And then 45 minutes later, he gets up in the House of Commons and does nothing. And then, 2 hours later, he gives a speech saying he is putting down this motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Bizarrely, a few minutes after that, Andy Bell from Channel 5 News had a conversation with John McDonnell, who said, we've got what we wanted with the announcement of the date of the vote, after Jeremy Corbyn had announced that, in fact, they were pushing for a motion of no confidence. So clearly, the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing, a sense of real confusion in Labour. Why is Corbyn doing this now at this time? Does he have any prospect of winning? I think it odd. I think it would have been better for him to sit back and let the Tories continue to tear themselves to pieces. Paul is a first-time caller from Brussels in Belgium. Good evening, Paul.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Welcome. Can you work out what Labour are up to?
I think they've missed the boat, actually, Nigel. I think it's too late, too little too late. And that they've actually seen, what I want to say, actually, I noticed today with Jacob Rees-Mogg, he actually sort of apologised to Theresa May. She sort of accepted it, and I think it's going to be no deal. I think they've written the riot act to her the other day with a vote, and they lost on that occasion, but she now knows she has to fall into line. I think it's going to be no deal.
Do you know, Paul, there's been a big change. I know we're debating Corbyn, but this is, the point you raise is a very valid one. There has been a bit of a change of tone today, as you say.
Yeah.
Jacob being quite polite. Edward Lee, who's been over the years quite a maverick right-wing backbencher, kind of saying, right, I'm now behind the Prime Minister. One or two people I've spoken to in the Tory party today, and there's now a feeling that because she's pushed this vote out until the 14th of January, that win or lose on that vote, they've kind of got her where they want her, and that we could, given that Jeremy Hunt clearly is now leading a group of people in the cabinet who are advocating a negotiated no-deal Brexit, there is more optimism amongst Leavers that we might be leaving on March 29th on a no-deal negotiated basis. Paul, do you know what? I wish I believed it. If it happens, I'll be delighted, but I'm still pretty sceptical that our political class will allow it.
What I'd just like to say, actually, Nigel, is also that I think that they've realised they're going to be out for maybe 20, 25 years if they don't actually come up and respect the result of the original referendum. And I think that's actually what's happened. It's now focused the imagination, focused her mind, and she knows what she has to do. And that's why I think there's this ceasefire, if you like, between Jacob Rees-Mogg and her, all very polite. And now they're going to go for no deal, and I think they're going to get Corbyn at the same time. That's going to stymie the Labour, because they don't want to be out for a lifetime. They don't want to be out for 20, 25 years.
So it could be then, Paul, that she becomes Saint Teresa of Euroscepticism. And the fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square finishes up with the woman that took us to our independence.
Indeed.
Paul, I think that theory has gained a bit of credibility today, but I'll believe it when I see it. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Graham says, if Jesus Christ himself negotiated the perfect deal on behalf of the Tories, Corbyn would vote it down if it would help him to gain power. The man is inept. Well, he's in danger of looking inept if this vote goes horribly wrong for him. John says Corbyn is doing what he should have done months ago. Well, John, a lot of people have said that, but surely it suited Corbyn for the Tories to start tearing themselves to pieces. I would have thought so. Neil from Mill Hill says, I just wanted to say this decision by Corbyn to table no confidence in the Prime Minister does that affect our Brexit situation? Well, no, it doesn't, Neil, because actually it's got no particular force of law, for one. Number two, it isn't going to pass. No, it just doesn't make any difference. If it was a motion of no confidence in the entire government, and of course we have a Fixed Term Parliament Act, if that was to go through, there'd be a couple of weeks for a new government, a new majority to try and find itself, or there would be a general election, and that could. John is damning on Twitter. He says he's a loser, doesn't know what to do next. Things are happening in his party that are beginning to show a lot of his weaknesses. He will be gone before the next election in 2022. He is in an odd place, particularly on Brexit, where the vast majority of key activists and MPs are Remainers. Corbyn has always been a Leaver. Gosh, it all takes some working out, folks, doesn't it? Alex is a first-time caller from Birmingham. Alex, have you sussed it all out?
Hi, Nigel. No, and if anything else, it's made me absolutely more confused than ever. I've always been a staunch Leave voter.
Yes.
Always been a staunch Leave voter. I think Jeremy Corbyn should have grew a pair today and put in that motion of no confidence. And as a Leave voter, I don't know where I stand anymore. I don't know whether I've made the wrong decision. I don't know. I really don't know what's for the best. And what I wanted to ask you, being the ex-leader of UKIP, is what would you have done different?
Oh, Alex, we're not really debating that now, but the point is this. When you go into any negotiation, and anybody in business will tell you this, the other side needs to know that you're more than prepared to get up and walk away and that they will lose business. And we, as a country that buy a huge number of motor cars and bottles of champagne and all the rest of it, actually had quite a strong negotiating position, and she, from the moment she agreed to the sequencing, the timing, out of the window went the concept of everything is agreed. Nothing is agreed until everything's agreed. Alex, we couldn't have handled this worse. And when she sort of finally parroted, no deal is better than a bad deal, they knew she didn't mean it. Alex, thank you. James from Esher is my next caller. James, good evening. What's going on?
Oh, hello, Nigel. Great to speak to you. I wanted to speak to you for quite a while. I think there might be some method in his madness.
Okay.
Jeremy Corbyn. I think the telltale sign is that he has tabled a motion against Theresa May, not the government.
Yep.
All the Conservative MPs are going to have to fall in behind her, and they will. And immediately afterwards, he's going to say, across the other side, there's 117 hypocrites who tried to vote her down, but now when it comes to a no-confidence vote, have voted the other way. You can't trust them.
Well, OK. No, I get that. But isn't that a very Westminster bubble type story? Is that actually going to impress anybody living out there in the real world?
I have to say, the number of people I speak to that are totally unimpressed by the whole thing. There has been, from the time we did this vote, from Gina Miller to the Lords to MPs trying to break down the Great Withdrawal Bill, it's been assaulted and attacked from all corners from the Remain side.
Oh, yes.
On and on and on, with the sole intention, in my view, of passing a message to the EU, which is offer them the worst deal you can, and we will reject it.
Well,
they've
absolutely.
done that with no deal as well.
Absolutely.
The propaganda that's been going out.
Yeah.
That's effectively. Everyone say we got all this new information. We haven't got new information. We had 2 years of propaganda through the BBC, pumped in through people's iPhones every day. A diet of how bad Brexit is.
Oh no, James, I disagree with you. We've got new information. We've had confirmation the European army will be completed by 2025. We have the French finance minister, Bruno Le Maire, telling us we are building an empire. We have demands all across for a Eurozone minister who can overrule national elected governments. We have Mr Juncker telling us the ambition is to have a foreign policy with no national veto. We've got lots of new information. Oh, and by the way, I nearly forgot, James. We have Brussels, the unelected bureaucracy, removing voting rights from Hungary, from Poland, Romania about to come. We've got lots of new information, James, which tells me the European Union is an over-centralised monstrosity, and we were right to vote leave.
And have these people, and I wonder how many MPs listen into these programmes, I wonder how many of them really realise what trouble that they are causing themselves in the future. Even if 5 million people out of the 17 million who voted for Brexit decide to think, well, I'm bored with all this, I'm going to go away, knock off another couple of million, you are going to have something like 8, 10, 12 million disenfranchised, very upset people in this country who think that democracy has been taken away from them. And if you can't get change through the ballot box, how do you?
Well, that's what always, James, that is what has always worried me, and that is why we have democracy, is that it means people use their vote to get change rather than using other means. And I want things to stay that way. But you're right, there is a danger that if the whole electoral system falls into contempt, that people begin to seek other means. James, you raise a very valid and important point. Thank you. Kevin says it's now clear Corbyn favours a Norway-type deal. Yeah, he has kind of been hinting, hasn't he, in the last couple of weeks, a customs union, single market type partnership. You may be right. He may be heading in that direction, but I think most of his parliamentary party want an all-out, full second referendum. Mick in Waddington says Corbyn must be mad unless he's done a cunning deal with the DUP. I don't see it, Mick. I don't actually see Jeremy Corbyn and the DUP even being on speakers. That's my view. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC at 6:45. And an afternoon of will he, won't he? And in the end, Jeremy Corbyn does say he's going to table a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister, Theresa May, over a handling of the Brexit deal vote. And yet, he does it without his own Deputy and Shadow Chancellor knowing that he's doing it. It's all very strange. That John McDonnell didn't seem to know that this was going to happen was very, very odd indeed. And many of you are really very, very confused. After Corbyn's strange decision to table a vote on no confidence, Mrs May, does it not show that Corbyn is just as likely to mess up the Brexit negotiations? Should he ever be in such a position? Vince, I don't know. Leslie says if the Tories deliver a no-deal Brexit, they will win the next general election hands down. Now, very interesting. I've talked on this show a little bit over the last couple of weeks about the United Nations Global Compact on migration. And as you know, I've been very critical of it. I've said that it blurs the distinction between refugees and economic migrants. It makes migration a human right and many other things that I have serious problems with. And yet, it's almost been ignored in the British debate, but I guess that's because Brexit dominates everything. And yet, in Brussels yesterday, there were some protests, there were some riots, and not just the yellow jackets we've seen in France and elsewhere, but this, I understand, was all about the UN Compact. I'm going to go to LBC's reporter in Brussels, Jack Parrott. Jack, good evening to you.
Good evening, Nigel.
What happened yesterday? Explain it to us, please.
So about 5,500 protesters came into the European area of Brussels around the European Commission and European Council. They were protesting this UN migration pact. It was called the March Against Marrakesh, Marrakesh being where the pact was signed last week. And it started relatively calm enough, but after a while descended into violence. There was tear gas was thrown by the police, clashes between the police and the protesters. Water cannons were used, and they were pulling some of the flags down from the European Union and smashing some of the windows of the European Commission.
Wow. So it really was a full-on sort of riot, basically.
It really, really was. It was organised mainly by the Flemish Nationalist Party called Vlaams Belang, who are kind of famous for taking a very hard line on migration. There was some criticism of the protest that it didn't only discuss sort of the migration pact, but was accused of being racist. There were banners shown saying Islam is not for Europe, etc.
Right, yeah, so there's always that element to these kind of protests. But Jack, is this now a big political issue in the Belgian Parliament? Are they going to agree this compact, or is there now real opposition to it?
It is a huge issue here in Belgium and among other countries. Countries like the Czech Republic, Hungary have all not signing up to the pact, and in fact it's brought down the Belgian government. The more mainstream Flemish Nationalist Party, the NVA, actually left the Belgian coalition government, leaving the centre-right party in a minority government because they signed it. The immigration minister, Theo Franken, he decided that they could not stay within this coalition with this pact being signed. So it's really threatening Belgian politics, and I don't think it's over for the Prime Minister Charles Michel just yet.
Excellent. Jack Parrott, thank you very much indeed. Well, there we are, folks. There's an issue. It's been huge in Australia, big debates in America, Israel too, countries like Hungary pulling out of it, Belgian government's about to fall because of it. You know, and the British government position is, our own minister says that it's a very, very good thing, and the British are happy to stand up to it, and we have no debate in this country whatsoever. Back to Mr. Corbyn. Ty says Corbyn has no plan. He just watches and reacts. This reaction has been a result of his own backbench MPs going mad at his lack of action. Ty, I think that's right. I do feel he's been rather pushed into this, but some of you think he's got this right. Corbyn has pulled a masterstroke. After losing a vote of no confidence by a massive vote against her, the Prime Minister will have to stand down, but the Tories will be able to stay in power and elect a new Brexiteer leader. JC gets to still leave the EU and doesn't have to subject Labour to government. Well, I don't know, Steve. You know, I mean, lots and lots of chess moves there. What is certain is that if Jeremy Corbyn wants to be Prime Minister, the one thing he must not have is the Conservative Party led by a true Brexiteer, because that would eat hard in the Midlands and the north of England and South Wales into his own Brexit-supporting Labour voters. I think it suits Corbyn to keep things pretty much as they are. which is why I'm surprised, very surprised, at the timing of this. Luke is a first-time caller from Dagenham. Luke, good evening to you.
Good evening, Nigel. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure to talk to you. So has Corbyn got this right?
Well, tactic to do what he's done because he's made so many threats in the past that he's going to be calling these calls of no confidence in the past. He didn't do it straight away, even though he said he was going to. I think he's gone away and he's probably thought about it a little bit and said, no, I've got to do this. I've said I was going to do it. Have to stand by his words now. But I don't think it really matters what the outcome is because I think the fact is that actually nobody really wants to be in charge right now. It's quite clear that's the case on the Conservative side because otherwise...
Oh, I don't know, Luke. I'm sure Boris would give it a go, wouldn't he?
Well, I think if that was true, then I think Theresa May would have been out. I think she would have gone. I think he would have stood up a bit more and it would have swayed his way. But I don't think Corbyn wants it either. I think he's done what he's done. I think if he wanted to be Prime Minister, like right now, it's not necessarily if he wants it. I think he wants it this way. I think that's the real question. I don't think he wants to take it right now with everything that's going on. It'll be far easier for him.
So why not? So why not, Luke? Why not just hang back and let the Tories have their row and let them tear themselves to pieces and don't do too much?
No, I totally agree with that. I think the reason why he's called the confidence in her instead of the government is because then he doesn't actually have to do anything realistically. He calls it, and whatever the case, whether she wins it or lose it, the Conservatives still have to deal with the mess.
Okay, no,
he can just sit back and watch, and then once March comes, once the Brexit deal's done and dusted, whether there's a deal or not, then he can turn around and go, right, well, you've messed this up, now I'm going to call the confidence in the government, no call confidence in the government. That's when he'll put his cards down, I think.
That's what he should have... To me, Luke, he should have waited for then. Thank you very much indeed for your call. I get from Steve in Reading, maybe Corbyn thinks 20 or so of the furious Brexiteers in the Conservative Party might abstain to give May more incentive to resign. Well, Steve may be, but I just don't see even furious backbench Tory MP Eurosceptics. I just don't see them going along with Jeremy Corbyn. I just do not see it. Peter is a first-time caller from Audley Edge in Cheshire. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. I'm confused and bemused by the events of the afternoon. I think Jeremy Corbyn looks to be either very indecisive or he's just been... Well, actually, the second one backs it up. He's being pushed around by his own political party. He doesn't look to be really in charge.
I think you've hit it on the head there. The way I see it, and there's 2 points to this, is that he's a secret leaver. We know that. And yet he's got to go along with what the party generally want. Theresa May is the opposite. So he's quite happy to make it look as though he's putting up an argument for the sake of remaining, but actually he doesn't want to. So he's quite happy to make the little token gestures and then sit back. The biggest problem we've got with all of this, and the reason there's been a problem from day one, is because the mandates that both parties got in on are being betrayed by 70% of the MPs, and that's where the problem lies.
Oh, yes. No, I agree with that completely. So, in a way, if you're a leaver, Corbyn's been quite useful, really, hasn't he?
Well, yeah, I think he's played a blinder today. That's good, because it will go nowhere. But he's quite happy for us to leave. And I think at the end of the day, it will end up in the no deal, because they'll never get a majority on any of the other options.
Including a second referendum?
Listen, the second referendum, 100,000 people have just voted on Martin Lewis's web page on Facebook. 61% for no deal as against a second referendum.
All right, well, that's a selective poll, but it's interesting. Peter, you may be right. I really hope you are. Thank you. Cameron in Dulwich, first-time caller. I'm sorry, you've got 35 seconds to make your point.
No worries. Yeah, I absolutely think it's a bit of a joke, really. We've got an MP that was voting to remain when her decision was to remain, and then we've got someone that's now counteracting that actually wanted to leave.
You couldn't invent it, could you?
No, it's unbelievable. And I mean, I hate the fact that there's people out there saying that young people didn't know what they're voting for. I'm 24, I'm in London. It's quite a struggling time at the moment for people to make money in London. And, you have to kind of take that bite and realise I'm an estate agent. And you know what? For the first time, prices are falling in London. And it's actually quite exciting that I might be able to actually afford a flat eventually or a house in London.
Yeah, no. Cameron, bad thing. And I'm really sorry. We're timed out, Cameron. I know you're a first-time caller. You're an estate agent. They're nearly as unpopular as politicians, Call us again when we've got more time. I'm back tomorrow night at 6 when maybe things will be clearer. No, I don't think they will be. At 10 tonight, it's Tom Swarbrick. But up next, it's Ian Dale.
Just another day for Theresa May.